Well, nice that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us at the Social Innovation Summit. We have a packed room. Everyone over the last day and a half has been excited to meet you. One thing I always like to start with a fun type of opening story.
Okay.
Everyone who's followed your life, they knew that you lived in the White House.
Yes.
Anything fun that you can remember just being a kid in the White House? Socks the cat, anything that you have that you can share?
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, Mel, I want to thank you and everyone here at the Social Innovation Summit for welcoming me so warmly. I particularly want to thank everyone who's keeping me hydrated and caffeinated. And I imagine if all of you really have been in dark, but hopefully also lively rooms for the last day and a half, you feel the same. And I want to thank our sign language interpreter. I have to confess, Mel, when you started to ask that question, which I didn't know you were going to ask, I thought about my life before the White House, and I don't really know why this came into my brain, but in 1985, I was 5 years old, and my kindergarten class took a trip to the Little Rock Zoo. And I came home from school that day totally distraught. And my poor parents, couldn't, for those of you that are parents like I am now, when your children are just, heaving and, they're so upset and you're like, oh, what's the beginning of the story? I'm trying to unpack what's happening. And I said to them, finally, once I gathered myself a bit, I can't believe you named me after an orangutan. Because I had never met anyone else named Chelsea. And at the Little Rock Zoo, there was an orangutan who was born in 1975, and I knew enough math to know that 1975 came before 1980, named Chelsea. And so I immediately drew the, thankfully, not accurate conclusion that my parents had named me after an orangutan. They then calmly explained, I think, as they were forestalling laughter, that I had been named after the song Chelsea Morning, when they were visiting the neighborhood of Chelsea in London a couple of years before I was born, and they had decided if they were ever lucky enough to have a girl, they would name her Chelsea. So that's a fun fact about me. There was a good 8-hour period where I really thought I'd been named after an orangutan.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
And I was like, where do I go from there?
Oh, I had no follow-up questions to that.
Well, so Chelsea the orangutan, she had been born at the Philadelphia Zoo. My husband, thank you, grew up in Philadelphia. So maybe there's a nice bit of poetry there. There you go. You can segue from that, hopefully.
You have been involved in so many things. You've been a leader in so many ways. You have a doctorate. I can't even spell doctorate, so that's very impressive. You have been a consultant. You've been an NBC correspondent. You've been a book author. Just everything. And now you're leading so many initiatives around the world on women's health and tech for good and other things. Is there a through line? Is there a way that you look at your life? I know you were quoted once in saying you tried, and I'll get it right, you tried really hard to care about things that were very different from your parents. So what is that through line that you're really following as you go through your journey?
Well, I found I stubbornly actually care a lot about the things that my parents care about. Yeah. Despite a lot of concerted effort to the contrary. I went to space camp as a kid and fell flat on my face in front of Sally Ride. That's another fun fact. And while I have kind of enormous curiosity and awe and appreciation for all of the extraordinary work that our scientists do to help us understand kind of the world beyond ourselves, I did feel kind of from quite early on a call to do everything that I could to try to help protect and promote public health and protect and promote women and girls. And so certainly, the Clinton Foundation and kind of the ethos and what kind of continues to motivate my parents and me is to try to do all that we can to make a difference in the areas we care about, and to try to bring maybe some unlikely partners around the table to do that in a way that hopefully is not only innovative and impactful, but really scalable and sustainable. And so really the origin of the Clinton Foundation was in my father's, I think, recognition that he needed to do more than he had done when he'd been in the White House to tackle the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and really the first kind of project of the foundation was to help transition the market of antiretroviral medicines, which were only reaching about 10,000 people in the global south in 2001, to kind of change that from a high price, low volume dynamic to high volume, low price dynamic. And today, about 30 million people in the global south access antiretrovirals, and about 27 million of them access them through agreements that we helped negotiate. I'm incredibly proud of that work. I had nothing to do with it. I'm proud of that work, not only though for the impact in people's lives around the world today, but also because that then became kind of the engine and the challenge to always think about what more we can and should be doing. And so we've negotiated more than 140 different market shaping arrangements around the world, but also I walked by and I saw McDonald's as one of the sponsors today, and we're incredibly...
You missed Ronald McDonald earlier.
I did?
Yes. He was taking selfies. I think he's going to be around at lunch.
Can I meet him?
Yes.
Okay. That'll be tomorrow morning over breakfast. I'll be like, kids, guess what I did yesterday? But with McDonald's, negotiating through the Alliance for Healthier Generation, which is a partnership between the Clinton Foundation and the American Heart Association, changing the defaults in Happy Meals from kind of flavored milk to kind of low-fat plain milk or water, and from French fries to fruit. And that's now changed more than 6 billion kids' experiences with Happy Meals. And so you can think like any one of those experiences might seem like a small, nice anecdote, but at a population level, like that's pretty powerful.
Huge, yeah.
Yep.
So on a practical level, day to day, you're working hard. You came into this room, you were doing something this morning. After you leave here, you're going to be working on something. Like, what is your priority right now personally at the Clinton Foundation? What are you working on right now that you can share with others? And then maybe share something exciting and new on your mind that maybe won't show up in your bio, that you're just like, wow, I'm super passionate about this right now. I read this amazing book, and this is like the thing that I'm thinking about all the time.
Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 answers to that question.
Okay.
All right. So I'm incredibly galvanized and inspired by the people that I get to work with every day, not only at the foundation, but including through partners like the extraordinary Mighty Group at RED. I, though, feel a particular connection to our work in the early childhood space because I am a mom of 3, and we have a program called Too Small to Fail because we believe that our kids are indeed too small to fail, and we try to meet parents and grandparents and other caregivers kind of wherever we may be to help equip us kind of with what we all need and what every child deserves to ensure that we can be effective teachers. Mm-hmm. So what that has looked like over the last decade of Too Small to Fail has really just been an extraordinary kind of privilege to work with people who are committed kind of to this mission, but coming at it from very different places. So for example, we've helped build more than 600 libraries and laundromats because low-income families spend about 2 to 4 hours a week in coin laundromats. We now have more than 1,300 playgrounds around the country that have prompts on them that kind of playtime can still be teach time. Talk to your kids about how many times they go back and forth on the swing. Talk to them about how many colors do they see, how many shapes do they see. Kind of early math prompts too. If you kind of swing 3 times and then you stop and you swing 4 times more, how many times have you been on the swing? And so things like that that we know are so critical because even just talking, reading, singing to our kids 15 minutes a day really helps build kind of their intellectual architecture, but also their social, emotional resilience over time. So that's something I'm super excited about, continuing to work with transport authorities across the country, with grocery store partners, with coin laundromat partners, with family courts because of how much time we know so many kids actually often can be spending in family courts with their caregivers. So just as many different ways as we can think about kind of trying to surround kids with kind of literacy and numeracy rich environments and support kind of their parents or their grandparents. So that's one thing I'm super excited about. Something else that I'm really deeply passionate about doing whatever we can, is our maternal mortality crisis, not only here in this country, but around the world. So as I'm sure many of you know, it's more dangerous to give birth today than when we were born, if we were born here in this country. If I were pregnant now, I'd have a 50% greater chance of dying in childbirth than my mother had when she delivered me. We have the highest maternal mortality rate of the wealthy world, the global north, the OECD countries, kind of whatever your kind of comparative group is. It's particularly egregious in my hometown of New York City, where we have disproportionately high maternal mortality. And if you are a black woman giving birth in New York City, you're 9 times more likely to die than a white woman giving birth in New York City, controlling for income and zip code and kind of any other variable. And so we are trying to do what we can in partnership with, just picking up New York, like the New York City Department of Health and Mental Health and kind of their maternal home health collaborative network to try to crowd in even more resources to help support the work that the city's already doing in partnership with doula networks and midwife networks and community-based organizations, with clinics, with big hospital systems, and everyone that we know kind of needs to be kind of part of ensuring that no woman is dying giving birth in America. And then also around the world, through the Clinton Health Access Initiative, we're working to do things like try to increase access to injectable, long-lasting, reversible contraceptives, trying to increase access to trained birth attendants, to midwifery care, trying to help support our partner countries as they're scaling up training for OBGYN care. And so kind of really thinking about how do we learn from kind of what is working everywhere and kind of bring that back to New York City and then vice versa. And then the third point, well, I should say, I guess the third point are my children. I love my children. I'm obsessed with them. I want to spend as much time with them as I can. But the fourth point, I guess, then, which was going to be my third point until I realized I had to include my kids, is, well, because he asked like what I was most excited about.
Give them a shout out if you want.
Is I'm a citizen and it's an election year. And I am really angry, actually, about what we've done to women in this country. I'm really angry that there are more than 30 million American women of reproductive age who live in states now where we no longer have the fundamental right to the healthcare that we and our healthcare providers believe that we should have. And so on a personal level, so I mean, you were so generous to mention so many of the things on a kind of professional level that I get to do as an author, with the Clinton Foundation, as an investor, as someone who's worked in television, but right now just with my citizenship hat on, because I'm a citizen, not just on election day, but every day. I'm going to do all that I can to try to help those of us who live in places like Illinois or New York to feel like we need to care about what's happening to women who live in places like my original home state of Arkansas. Because the United States of America should not be just the flag that we cheer for at this summer's Olympic Games. It should be how we feel all connected to one another, particularly in the solidarity of suffering that we are imposing on women and girls around our country. And I hope that all of us will feel at least a little bit of the anger that I feel about the fact that we have made policy choices now to make childbirth dangerous and for some women a death sentence in 2024 in the richest country in human history. Absolutely. So I'm excited about the work that I do every day. I am grateful for the work I do every day. But I'm also incredibly passionate about what I hope to be able to do as a citizen to try to help center women and girls in this election.
Thank you. Thank you. So, yep. So I'm going to go off script a bit because of your answer.
Yeah. I mean, Mel was nice enough before. He's like, "Is there anything off limits?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can ask me anything. I mean, if I don't want to answer it, I'll say I don't want to answer it." But like, go for it.
So how do you and your family, you think about this? You've been part of the national thread around this conversation. How do you think the country is going to reshape itself in the next 10 years, right? Because of the complexities, I'm using a nice word, the complexities of our world today and then the newspaper. But then more so in this room here, as you know, there are a lot of companies, there are a lot of innovators, there are a lot of foundations, there are a lot of people working on the front lines. What do you think their place or our place is in all of that, in working together, building a community, in moving toward where you think the country needs to be reshaped or the direction it needs to go in the next 10 years?
Goodness. Well, I think there were a few questions, and I'll try to answer them. Although I want to be clear, I certainly just am speaking for myself. I do think the one thing I want to be very explicit about is I want everyone to vote. Like, I think our democracies are healthier when everyone is able to participate. And so when you ask about what can companies do, is that I hope companies give people time off so they can vote. In some places like New York, we thankfully have early voting now, and so hopefully then it's much easier for people to vote. We can vote on the weekends in New York. In some places there are mail-in ballots. In fact, that's the default now in certain states. But in some places, like, you still have to show up on election day unless you've thought to get like an absentee ballot, often like way before election day. And so I would just hope, like, truly agnostic to like party or whatever candidates, like, you personally might hope that your colleagues would support, you just support the right to vote and the right to participate. And the right to vote not only in federal elections, but in state and local elections. Because we know that every level of government matters. And I would hope that that can really be manifested in how kind of companies support all of the people who make up your company being able to engage in the ongoing, I hope, like, health of our democracies. And so that includes like having time to go vote in the local school board election, or the local city council election, or the county commissioner election, as well as, of course, for the President of the United States of America. So that's one point that I would make. And I think you ask a broader point about kind of the complexity of where we are at this moment. I think we are partly in such a complex moment because only about a dozen states actually require civics education in schools at an age-appropriate level. And I would hope this, too, could be a place where there's not only bipartisan but nonpartisan support of supporting kind of requirements for public, but also in states with kind of voucher programs, particularly, so where public dollars are going into parochial schools or other non-public institutions, of requiring civic education so that young people grow up into voting age adults knowing, like, oh, I need to show up to the city council election because the city council or the mayor have dominion over this area that I really care about. Or I need to know to show up for the state elections because the state legislature and the governor kind of really have agency and influence over this. And the same at the federal level. So that's something else that I hope we can kind of get behind as an antidote to whatever each of us may diagnose as not being very healthy in our country right now. And I do think we need to, once again, try to have some standard of what objective truth and facts look like, and have the distinction between, like, what are real facts, what are opinions off of those facts, also important, and what is either benign or malicious mis or disinformation. And to have kind of higher standards, candidly, of, I think, kind of comport and behavior from our social media and other kind of large companies that do so much to either inform or not inform, in this instance, like the voting public. I don't think any of that should be terribly controversial, actually. And I would hope that any of us who believe that we kind of want to live in a democracy that better reflects what certainly every poll says about where American sentiment is, whether on gun violence prevention, on climate change investments, certainly on protecting a woman's right to make our own healthcare decisions. I think we only reach kind of a government that truly looks by and for the people and reflective of the people if the people are well informed, are able to vote, and actually show up to vote in every election over the course of our lifetimes.
Well said. Well said. This has been wonderful. Amazing to have you here at the Social Innovation Summit. Final parting question. I know you've given us a lot of direction and thoughts, but
we talked about orangutans and abortion.
yeah,
I mean, who else
the range of things.
To provide that.
Parting thought or mantra or favorite quote, just to inspire people to go out, leave these doors, and get to work with the urgency of now.
Oh gosh, I guess I'll leave you with two. Yesterday would have been my grandma Dorothy's 105th birthday if I were lucky enough to still share this planet Earth with her. She was a huge part of my life. She was actually born here in Chicago. She was born to unwed teenage parents who were not ready to be parents. When she was 8 years old, they put her and her 2-year-old little sister on a train by themselves to go from Chicago to Los Angeles. At the time, it was a 2-day trip, and they had to switch trains in Phoenix. She lived with grandparents who also didn't want her. When she was 13, they told her, like, you're basically an adult, like, you need to take care of yourself. She got a job working in someone else's home as a mother's helper, a nanny basically, and a housekeeper while she herself was still a child. She graduated with honors from high school. She went back to college in her 50s. Wow. Why am I telling you this? Because she was maybe the most optimistic person that I knew. I could not imagine having a life like the one that she had led, where the only points of optimism for her were her teachers, who always showed kindness to her, who shared their lunches with her, who told her that she was more than her circumstances. And regardless of how anyone in this room may have or will vote, I do think it's an extraordinary American story that my grandmother, who was born before women could vote in this country, who had a life of abuse and neglect, made choices to instill in her daughter a sense of extraordinary purpose and love and security and possibility, so my grandmother lived long enough to vote for her for president. And my grandmother always said to me, life is not about what happens to you, it's about what you do with what happens to you. Right? You cannot choose what someone else did to you. You cannot choose what someone else said to you. You cannot choose what someone else may have even taken away from you. But you get to choose how you react to that. You get to choose what you do next. And then the second thing I'll say is advice from my mother, who always told me, because I was like thrust into the public spotlight as a baby, and had like insane things said about me as a child by adults who I think still should have known better. But she always said to me, you know, Chelsea, it is important to take serious criticism from serious people seriously. Like your parents, your teachers, your grandparents, your ministers, like people who want you to be able to be a better person. It's also important to take unserious criticism from unserious people unseriously. And I think in this moment in time, that hopefully is helpful to all of us.
Wow.
Mel, thank you so much.
Dr. Chelsea Clinton, thank you very much.